A warm welcome to everybody. This is the second of our autumn-winter series of Happy Hours, and we're delighted that we are joined today by a stellar cast, and also with two of our core sponsors, Winckworth Sherwood Solicitors and United St Saviour's Charity. But this session would not be also made possible without the support of the UKRI, or Innovate UK, and we're grateful for Winckworth Sherwood, United St Saviour's and them for their ongoing support. I'm just a warm-up act really for Charlotte Kirk, a partner at Winckworth Sherwood, who's going to be chairing this session. But I'm really delighted that we're putting the spotlight back on to Almshouses. It's something that the HousingLIN sort of goes back to several times, and we're also joined, and you hear a little bit from Liz later as well, by the Almshouse Association. But I don't really want to spoil Charlotte's thunder, so I'm going to immediately hand over, and I'll come back later on during the course of the happy hour. Enjoy it.
Thank you, and thank you very much indeed, Jeremy, for that rather amazing welcome. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this happy hour, Almshouses Reimagined, building strategic partnerships to evolve housing for today's older communities. As Jeremy says, my name's Charlotte Cook. I'm a partner in the social housing real estate team at Winckworth Sherwood. And as Jeremy has said, I do have a fabulous panel here with me today to talk through the various items on our agenda. So firstly, my WS partner, Matt Cowen, will be talking to the white paper, which we as a firm produced, looking at various ways that many of our housing providers are entering strategic partnerships across the housing spectrum. We'll then be joined by two speakers from United St Saviour's, Lizzie Lynch, who leads for them on public affairs and consumer relations, and is a HousingLIN future leader. Also, Alison Benzimra, who is the head of research and influence, who will talk again about a number of United St Saviour's projects. Unfortunately, Sophie Amiel from Bournemouth University, who was hoping to come along today, is unable to join us. But Alison and Lizzie will be reporting on the Lemonade project, which they worked on with Sophie. So we've still got that information coming up for you there. And finally, Liz Fathi, from the trustee of the Almshouse Association, director of the Trust Partnership and ex-CEO of Tiverton Almshouse Trust, will be wrapping up with a few thoughts and comments following the end of our speakers' comments here. A brief note about Winckworth Sherwood. We're a full-service firm operating within the social housing arena, and we've had a fabulous and long-lasting relationship with the HousingLIN pretty much since its inception, which is brilliant for us. We've worked with the HousingLIN on a number of happy hours conferences and have reported into the various work streams. As you'll all know, the HousingLIN is a fabulous tool and resource for all of us, and it certainly assists us as a firm and as lawyers to better serve our clients and their customers in giving so much useful background information to policy and research matters. So without further ado, you don't want to hear too much from me, but you'll have to put up with one of my partners here. So Matt's going to speak to you about the white paper that we've produced. I'm just going to swivel my screen around, as Jeremy said, in a Strictly Come Dancing type fashion. Over to you.
Thank you. Don't expect any other dance moves from me today. And I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me along. As Charlotte said, I'm a part of the corporate governance team. I specialise in affordable housing matters. And the main topic for discussion today is all about strategic partnerships and how to build them. And that is the hot topic, I would say, for the sector more widely at the moment. And it's something that we've been looking at particularly as a firm. And what we did a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago now, I think, was issue a white paper. So what that means is we interviewed over 80 different stakeholders from across the sector, and we put together all the findings and we put it into a white paper to discuss strategic partnerships. It explores loads of things. It explores what strategic partnerships might look like, what makes good ones, what makes bad ones. And it's a really useful document that brings together the thoughts of different stakeholders. So lenders, housing associations, developers, consultants, councils, those are all the sorts of people that we were interviewing. So do take a more in-depth read. It should have been sent to you in the chat. But what I'm just going to do over the next few minutes is just summarise some of the key statistics and build on some of those based on our experience that we're seeing. And the sort of the headline point that we found was that 67% of the organisations we spoke to had entered into strategic partnerships. That's a huge majority of the affordable housing sector that's doing these sorts of things. And the same figure again, 67% of those 67% said that they were successful. 29% said that there were mixed results, and 4% said that they were unsuccessful. Now, I think that's actually a really encouraging picture. You know, 2/3 pretty much of those that entered into said that they were worth doing it. So that's really successful. And I suspect that part of that is around timing, because what we see is typically when partnerships are entered into, everyone's sort of very happy, and it's only over the longer term that things sometimes go awry and they start to pull away. So I'll come on to that a bit more in a moment. But I do think partnerships need to last for the long term, because that's often where things get a bit more tricky. The other finding was that 76% of respondents plan to enter into partnerships in the next 2 years. And typically they were about building, funding new social housing, and often there were partnerships with public sector bodies, HousingLIN, the GLA, that acts as an accelerator and use their expertise to help with some of those things as well. So I think the one thing that's very clear from those statistics is that partnerships are absolutely core to housing delivery going forwards. And there seems, in my view, to have been a bit of a shift over the last 10 years that I've been doing this job. I think partnerships used to be a bit more opportunistic. They used to kind of be more one-off projects. And now they are strategic, scalable frameworks that are relied upon to deliver over the long term. And I think that's a very different mindset to get into as a member of those partnerships, because the risks and the challenges and the rewards can be quite different. And I think that comes from a sense that you can actually achieve more with others than you can on your own. And in a context and in a society where money's tight, value for money is a big focus, I think strategic partnerships mean more certainty, they mean better value for money, they mean shared risk, and all of those things are really appealing, certainly to the people that we were interviewing. And I do think a lot of almshouses are at the forefront of that shift to the partnership model, particularly to address the funding challenges, but also with a range of other types of partnerships, different stakeholders, sometimes to deliver those specialist services to your residents. But just sort of moving on to some of the key themes that came up in the interviews, where people were not struggling, but they found that partnerships were sometimes quite challenging. So there are a few things. First one is aligning your values with your partner and being honest about the actual intentions. And we see this all the time when we're advising with these sorts of things. Yes, each different partner will bring different skills and they will have different objectives. And that's okay. Sometimes you enter into a partnership and you think, well, the other person must have the same objectives to me because we're all in this together and we're all best friends. But it's okay to be upfront about the fact that actually you want different things out of this partnership. And we're increasingly seeing private capital come into the affordable housing space. And if you've got a partner, for example, that wants to take an equity stake in social housing to get long-term returns, maybe they're less interested in the quality of the homes, the service delivery to social housing tenants. And that's a bit of a tension sometimes, but that can be okay as long as it's acknowledged what the different drivers are. And then you can start to build in proper protections and you can think about how best to serve that partnership. And I mentioned the private sector investment example because one of the other statistics to come out of this report is that 89% of respondents expect more private capital to flow into the affordable housing sector. And that is massive. And 26% of our respondents were considering investing in a for-profit RP if they hadn't already. So there is a big market shift taking place. I appreciate that not everyone on this call will be, looking at private capital to sort of partner with, and that's absolutely fair enough. But there will be some on the call that are, and there is a big market shift taking place. And I think there's going to be a lot more focus on this tension between returns to the private sector, private investment, and the protection of social housing. And that was one of the key themes that came out of that paper. And frankly, even if you're not looking at private capital, coming into your sector, it's important to be aware of what is going on in the wider sector, because that helps you form your own strategies and business plans. The second thing that really came out of it as a risk was risk sharing. So it's easy to go into a strategic partnership thinking you are doing one sort of partnership, one sort of deal with your counterparty. By the time you've sort of started negotiating, you've gone through heads of terms phase, you might have if it's a joint venture, you might have a joint venture agreement. Over the course of that period, maybe it's a few months, you can sort of end up in a place and with documents that don't actually do what you originally meant them to do. So whilst you might have great intentions and think it's a perfect match to begin with, you often end up in a place where it's not quite what you thought, particularly when you've got such a volatile and shifting market. So that was something else that really came out of our interviews. And I've actually got one deal at the moment where exactly that's happening. And it's taken a year or so to negotiate some of the documents. But now our client is trying to extricate themselves from the deal before they've even entered into anything, just because the markets have shifted and the deal doesn't really work for them in terms of what they're doing now. So sort of linked to that, another key theme was building in flexibility into these partnerships. If you have a long-term strategic partner, then things are going to change during the lifetime of that partnership. What you don't want to do is get yourself in a straitjacket where you can't do things differently. Markets shift, priorities change, people leave organizations, organizations merge as well. And how you get out of the partnership actually needs to be central to thinking when you get into the partnership. And really, in my experience, partnerships are a lot less likely to fail if everyone is clear from the outset about what happens if things change. And it's sometimes quite difficult to preempt that, because there are unknown unknowns where you don't know what's going to happen. But if you've got an agreement or a partnership model that allows that flexibility, then at least you've got options. And this is the final point, really. The documents. So you often you sort of find that partnerships just get entered into on the back of a personal relationship, and there's kind of a general sense that it will all be fine because Dave or Rachel or whoever it is on the other side is my mate, and they wouldn't do me over. Fine, but where you've got a long-term partnership, that needs to last, and you need to have a structure and documents that actually last beyond particular individuals, particular personalities, and survive those personal relationships. Because, as I mentioned earlier, we frequently find that the beginning of a partnership often goes quite well when everyone knows what they're doing. But sometimes people leave, and the success of a partnership over the long term is really about that ongoing communication and acknowledging how the relationship might change over time. And sort of related to that, I suppose, how well does the organisation understand the nature of the arrangement that's being entered into? A partnership between two organisations is not just a partnership between two people. There needs to be a proper understanding of the ongoing nature of what's needed. So reports on the documents, proper ongoing contract management, awareness of timescales, regular review to see if it's still working. They all need to be baked in to the actual model. So I'm going to, exactly 10 minutes. That's rare for me. So I'm going to leave it there. There's a few points to get into thinking. As I say, it should be in the chat, the document. So the paper goes into a lot more detail. So do let me know. Any other questions? Let's swivel round back to Sherwood.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Matt. Lots of takeaways from there. What I'll do is I'll look to bring everything together when we go to our Q&A at the end. But just to hand over to Alison and Lizzie, what I think Matt was saying there was an awful lot is about the communications between the partners, between the parties, between those looking to go into partnership and possibly extricating themselves from it at the end of the day. Alison and Lizzie, lots of partnerships that United St Saviour's have been involved in for some time now. So may I hand over to you, please?
Thank you, Charlotte. All right, can you see my screen? Great. So thank you so much for having us today. It's lovely to present on the HousingLIN webinar. I'm Alison Benzimra. I'm Head of Research and Influence at United St. Saviour's Charity, and I'm joined today by my colleague Lizzie Lynch, who's our Communications and Influence Lead, and as was mentioned earlier, is on the Future Leaders Programme of HousingLIN. So we're going to talk about Appleby Blue, but kind of place the context of who United St. Saviour's is. So United St. Saviour's was established in 1541, and we have 500 years of experience working in the borough of Southwark. Over the centuries, the charity has gathered a portfolio of investment properties. Probably the crown in the jewel in the crown is the properties around Borough Market. The income from those properties goes towards our community investment program, and we fund about £1 million a year towards organisations doing work in the borough of Southwark, and then have lots of partnership with other funders doing similar type of work. And then we provide housing for older people. So we have 4 Almshouse sites. One is St. Saviour's Court, which is in Purley. We've got Hopton's Gardens, which is a quintessential historic almshouse behind the Tate Modern. We have Helen Peel, which is a small almshouse in Rotherhithe with 7 units. And then our flagship almshouse is Appleby Blue. The eligibility criteria to be a resident at our almshouse is to be over the age of 65, to be in financial and/or housing need, and to have a connection to the borough. I think it's also important to emphasize that we're a learning organization. So we make sure that we're learning from all the activities across the organization and then sharing that learning widely. So Appleby Blue, as I mentioned, was opened in July 2023, and it's a really exemplar case of a Section 106 working well. This was between Southwark Council, a private developer, and United St. Saviour's Charity. The building was designed by Witherford, Watson and Mann, and it was built on council-owned land. So there was a care home on the site that was no longer fit for purpose. And just kind of emphasizing the partnership working, because it is council-owned land, the council have 50% nominations. But we work very closely with Southwark Council across various departments because we're such a dynamic organization. So this works really well because we are basically housing the same residents. What's unique about Appleby Blue is that it's an older person's housing scheme with a community kitchen and centre embedded within the building. And so it really is a modern take on the traditional almshouse and is fit for the 21st century. So it's not just about the building. And this graphic represents the Appleby Blue model. So a key element of it is the design quality. So the lens that we're looking at Appleby is through this kind of kaleidoscope. What is it about the design quality? What is it about our resident support model? And what is it about the community integration that really makes this model work? I was at an event a couple of weeks ago, and I had a young gentleman come up to me who's in sixth form. He wants to be an architect. And he asked the most insightful question. He said, does the building create the people, or do the people create the building? And I just thought that's such a fabulous question because it really does encapsulate the insight that we're trying to gather from Appleby Blue. Lizzie, over to you.
Oh, thank you, Alison. As mentioned, part of my role is to ensure that we're communicating what we're doing at Appleby Blue and also influencing others. So we are a Southwark-based charity, which means we only kind of operate in the borough of Southwark. But we are really keen to ensure that all of our learnings from Appleby Blue and our other almshouses and our community investment programme are shared with other organisations. So we're currently exploring kind of post-occupancy study partners to gather more quantitative evidence about Appleby. But bearing in mind, we're only kind of 2 years into this. We decided last year to put together the Appleby Blue 1 year on report to gather our learnings so far. this is because of a lot of interest from organisations and lots of attention from the media. And we just thought right now we've got such a key moment to try and inform government with relatively new government, and keen to capture where we are. So we've produced this report, and my role today is to share kind of some of those key learnings and how other people can take different elements of Appleby and apply it to their own projects. We really hope that it's a blueprint for all kind of future social housing, specifically for older people in our cities across the UK. And we don't think that this is just something that is a one-off. So it is just one model, but we think that the principles behind it are completely transferable. So with that said, I will go through alongside Alison some of those key recommendations, which you can find in the report. I think Sally's also going to share those links. So our first kind of key recommendation is to invest in quality design. We really believe that good design should be available to everyone, and social housing shouldn't just be kind of a good enough standard. And this is something that Alison's also tried to explore in her HousingLIN viewpoint, which I think went live yesterday. And the design of the building really has a powerful impact on the mental well-being and broader social outcomes of our residents. So yes, we know that quality design costs more. So we think this costs around 25% more than your standard social housing development, but we really believe that the social benefits far outweigh that. It also means less need for retrofits, for repairs down the line. And I think we've also really taken our Hopton's Almshouse, which is a Grade 2 listed building. It's been around since the 1700s, and we hope that Appleby is that listed building of the future that will be here for hundreds of years to come as well. So we're incredibly proud of the design. We've been nominated for the Reba, Neve Brown and Sterling Prize Awards, which are next week. And we also really encourage everyone to watch our Housing Design Awards film, which shows beautifully the kind of impact that good design can have. Yes, on the aesthetics of how it looks, but actually on the impact on our residents as well. And then our second recommendation is all around collaboration across sectors. So everything Charlotte and her team mentioned earlier on about partnerships. This project, as Alison mentioned, simply wouldn't have happened without collaboration across sectors. The Section 106 agreement that underpinned it is a brilliant example of what can be achieved when public, private and voluntary sectors come together. And particularly kind of the long-term partnership that we have with Southwark Council was completely fundamental to this. And it unlocked all of the resources and expertise and meant that we had a shared vision with the council from the very beginning of the project to make sure that this worked and that the design quality was also embedded into the planning agreement from the very beginning. So our developer also had to get on board with that as well. And I think we must just make sure that we stop working in silos and understand that older people's housing is the crossroads of a lot of our different systems. And the picture that we've got here is from Social Ludo, the Serious Games project, which we encourage everyone to check out if they can. It's a really great scheme that can help you understand how important it is to talk to different organisations, but actually even different sectors within your own organisation as well. Sometimes we all kind of get cooped up in our own team, but actually making sure that we collaborate within our own organisation as well. And kind of along that same line of making sure we're not working in silos, our third recommendation is all about bridging housing, health and social care. So we really believe, and I think Appleby has really shown us, that these systems need to work as an integrated whole system and not be seen as isolated things. And when we address them together, we build a much stronger foundation for our residents. So one of the core components of Appleby is our resident support model. And like we said, we're very proud of the design, but the work that our team do day in, day out is what makes the building so great. So what they do is kind of bridge these systems for our residents, making sure that their financial well-being is doing well, that they really act as advocates for them. And as people's needs change, as we all get older, it's really key to have people outside of the family to make sure that we can evaluate how people's cognitive needs and physical needs are changing. And they work really closely with the social care team at Southwark, with people's families. And I think one thing that really stood out for me when talking to our resident support team on this is that often a lot of residents can get letters from the council or about their pensions, and it can, if you don't understand it, or you don't have a family member that can help you make sense of those things, it can cause weeks of anxiety. And actually our residents can just go downstairs, go into the office and ask our team for help, and they'll quickly explain to them what it is, and even the health benefits of not having that anxiety makes a real difference. So I think this is a really key recommendation, and is the reason why moving to Appleby is just so transformative for people. We had a resident called John also mentioned to a journalist, which I was slightly apprehensive about, but he said moving to Appleby was like jumping out of an aeroplane without a parachute, but landing on a bouncy castle. And I think the bouncy castle element is, yes, because the building is so gorgeous, but also because our team provide that support and make sure moving isn't as scary, which it especially can be when you're at an older age.
Thank you, Lizzie. So just to continue with the recommendations, I think what we've really come to appreciate is that we are a place-based organisation, and that really does give us a deep understanding of not only the issues facing residents, but also the wider community. And in a way, this goes back to understanding the Appleby Blue model. By working with and engaging with communities, we're learning of what is it about the design, what is it about the resident support, and what is it about the community integration. And this learning will inform our future developments. I think what's also critical is that because it's a continual learning, this will also inform how we work with our strategic partners within the built environment. We don't just build housing, we build communities. And by integrating those two together and working with partners to ensure that you're creating thriving communities and building housing that people want to move into, you end up building, having a built environment that people really want to be involved in. The other aspect is embedding older people's housing within communities, and this really encapsulates the ethos of Appleby Blue. United St. Saviour's wants to change the perception society has towards older people, and Appleby is enabling us to do that. By having the building being an asset to the wider community, they see older people living in their neighbourhood as a benefit. And the design of the building has also enabled this. So it's got a double volume glazed frontage, and it enables the people on the street and the people within the community centre to really have a conversation between them. By also embedding the building within the wider community, it benefits both young and old. So that image that you see there is a program that we do with the Together project. It's called Songs and Smiles, and it's a baby and toddlers group because many young parents suffer from loneliness and social isolation, and this is a lovely example of an older generation providing support and wisdom to a younger generation. So we have 3 generations in one room. The other thing that we know from the conversations we have with our residents, but we also just know from research, is that often people are forced to move at a point of crisis. So due to a bereavement or health or financial situation. And we've had residents say to us that they had been looking for several years to find an alternative, but nothing was inspiring them to move. So we really wanted to focus on the pull factors and not those push factors. And you often see those pull factors being demonstrated within the private sector, but there were little options available to older people living in social housing, and particularly in inner city environments. And by creating aspirational social housing, you're having a downstream and upstream benefit. So your downstream benefit is that you're freeing up under-occupied homes. And by creating good quality housing for older people, it actually benefits the wider housing chain. The upstream benefit, and to what Lizzie was saying earlier, is that it relieves pressure on the NHS and social care. So it's a win-win situation. I think a major learning for us is that food is a social connector. Part of our strategic partnerships has also been with the academic world and research funders. So the Lemonade project was with Bournemouth University, and it's a community-based food model project for over 60s. It was funded by the Vivenza Foundation, and it was part of their funding call called Suitable Living Environments for an Aging Population. It really was an ethnographic research study in that the researchers stayed in the researcher in residence studios, and it really humanized the research process. The researchers became neighbors. So the aim of the project was to explore how multi-generational activities could be co-created with older adults around food growing, cooking, and meal sharing to improve the health and well-being outcomes of social connectedness. So I can't divulge too much of the findings because papers have been submitted to publications and are being reviewed at the moment. But we have definitely, anecdotally seen the benefit of the Lemonade project, and it's demonstrated that food brings different cultures and ages together and has formed the basis of the Appleby Kitchen program. And then finally, our biggest lesson is the richness of our learning is because we are a place-based organization. And as I mentioned, we have a 500-year history in the borough. So we really do have a deep understanding of the issues facing the borough. We're deeply connected to our residents and co-produce throughout our process and through our community investment program and the partnerships that we have with the voluntary sector in the borough, we really do have a deep understanding of the issues affecting communities in Southwark. And this is not only shaping our strategy, but it's also influencing housing policy on a local and national level. Over to you, Lizzie.
Yes, thanks, Alison. So this is just to say a quick look ahead. So last year we launched our pilot series, the Appleby Blue Autumn Lecture Series, which was really successful. So we will be running that again this year. And our first event will be focused on partnership working with our community investment hat on and all about funding, premises and developing relationships to get funding. So that's in partnership with Community Southwark as well. So please do check that out and stay tuned for our intergenerational living and collaboration in the built environment sessions as well later on in the autumn.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Really interesting to hear some more interconnected partnerships, shall we say, as opposed to the more top level strategic partnerships, which Matt was talking about in his commenting on the research that we've done there, looking at those more directly connecting to individuals and individuals within the community. Can I pass over now to Elizabeth, not Lizzie, for you just to talk to a few takeaways that you've gleaned from this, and then I will hand over to the Q&A box and fire some questions at you all.
Absolutely, and yeah, huge. It's a hugely impressive scheme. Congratulations to the team who's pulled it off, because we're all very proud of it. The Almshouse Association is very proud of it alongside you. So it's just a brilliant outcome and a brilliant scheme. Good luck for the Sterling Prize. So it's interesting, isn't it? Because as I was listening to that and thinking about almshouses in general and thinking about the title of this session, which is Almshouses Reimagined, and therefore thinking, is that all almshouses reimagined? So the Almshouse Association looks after 1,600 members, 30-odd thousand units. When I say looks after, it's a member organisation. So I was thinking, how can we scale this down rather than scale this up, if you like, because 80% of our members have less than 20 units. So there are very few almshouses that are of the size and scale that can have a partnership at such, as you have. However, the things that you mentioned and the things that you talked about, even right down to those partnerships that, the co-production, the improving outcomes, the learning and sharing, actually goes on at a very small level with these individual almshouses all over the country. It's just that the partnerships have to be and the way it would have to be just in a slightly different way. So I just thought, if I quickly, and I won't take everybody's time, but if I just quickly sort of go back to scale and almshouse model, I think it's really important that we don't lose sight of the almshouse model, and that we always keep that in mind as to how we can use that to benefit and to encourage partnership. And I think that initial on the white paper, the initial thoughts about communication, is absolutely central. And therefore, in order to communicate, you have to understand. And almshouse model, which has been going for over 1,000 years, and we have a lot of almshouses that have centuries old buildings and governing documents. It's important to remember that the model is a trustee model, and that it is a localism model, and that it's local trustees looking after local almshouses for local people. It's all about local, really. And the governing documents that surround almshouses can be restrictive, and it can look to the outside world as if partnerships might be, the trustees might be being awkward, or certain things are difficult to take a minute to get through. And actually they do, because the governing document is something that is individual to every single charity. And so every single time somebody who might have partnered one charity goes out and tries to partner another almshouse charity, that might look different. And so we have to remember that in scaling up or scaling down. Most almshouses have an endowment, and the way the endowment can be used also has rules around it. And so it can look as if you've got a lot of money or not very much money, or, that very much depends on what's restricted and unrestricted. And that's all about the housing charity model. So when we partner with local authorities, or when we partner with private partnerships, the way that the almshouse world and the trustees' vocabulary will be very different from the partner, are likely to be very different from the partner organisation. And so I think, just as another sort of off the top of my head statistic, only 25% of almshouses have a warden, only 50% have a clerk. So a lot of the time you are talking to trustees, and they are voluntary, volunteers, I should say. So I think when it comes to major the funding for new almshouses, even some of our middling size almshouses are still looking at development and building new and refurbishing, and looking at how we can reimagine almshouses as they go into the future. And we've been looking in the Almshouse Association about whether we look at corporate social responsibility models, whether we look at, the private capital, the types of organisations like Resolution. We've been talking to them about how we can partner with them as an Almshouse Association, maybe then allowing a sort of economy of scale for the smaller ones to get together and receive that sort of funding. So we're looking at that. In terms of partnerships, I think it's also with almshouses, not just about building new, it's about bringing partnerships in that can help social isolation into the almshouse that you've got going at the moment. So that is all about the relationship that those trustees and the wardens and the clerks have with their local area. And and it really gets to very small micro sort of elements. For example, there's a fabulous partnership in Budleigh Salterton in Devon, and it's only 3 almshouses, but there are 30 people on the housing register in Budleigh Salterton, which is the most tiny town. It's really just a big village in Devon. And what happened there is that a care home had to shut down, and the funds were used to build these 3 almshouses, and the local trustees have had to work very hard to get just some funding for furniture and, you know, the equipping, fixtures and fittings. And it's a massive ask for trustees. But I think that certainly we in the Housing Association and the Almshouse Association can try and help sort of gather some of these threads together, gather the things that Appleby Blue have been talking about, and try and make sure that the partnerships go forward, because they help with isolation, social isolation. It's not just about the building of the new. So I think, just to sort of wrap up quickly, it's about partnerships understanding each other no matter what the scale, because almshouses do bring that small scale, and they do have quirks, but they are more than willing to work with people and to see support. And I think I'll just end with one story. And it struck me when you were talking, Alison, about do buildings create people? Do people create buildings? And that is such a big topic that, you know, PhD theses have been written on, and it is amazing, but it is actually both, isn't it? It's both together. But when I was chief exec of Tiverton Almshouse Trust, which is one of the larger almshouse trusts, one morning a resident came to see me quite upset and said, "I've had the most awful dream because I won the lottery." And I thought, I'm going to have to go and see Liz and tell her that I've got more money and I can't live here. So my strap line from then on was sort of living in an almshouse is better than winning the lottery. But I think it comes down to that community and what goes on around it. And congratulations again to Appleby Blue.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Liz. Thank you very much indeed to all of my speakers. Great presentations there, and I think just goes to show that partnerships can be both small and large. They don't necessarily need to be the huge, great big ones that some of the people that we interviewed for our white paper were involved in. They can be smaller and more perfectly formed, and they all work equally well. Before I let Jeremy loose on the fated words of housing, health and social care, which we'd love to see as a partnership that actually comes into fruition, but let's park that for the moment. Just wanted to pick up a couple of questions in the Q&A, and people do send the further questions that you do have here. A couple of questions regarding design, and these are directed at Alison and Lizzie, really. So firstly, what data or metrics were analysed to establish that good design costs 25% more than what? Is it really just quality of materials and amount of space? And then sort of a follow-up question to that is, what evidence have you got to support the narrative about positive payback on amount invested? Alison and Lizzie, would you like to pick up those questions there?
Thank you. So the part of the Section 106 deal was a private developer had to contribute 30 million. So it was around about 24 million went into the construction of Appleby, and 6 million went to in lieu payment to the council. United St Saviour's contributed 5 million to the build of Appleby, which is far more than normal social housing. I think what's important to acknowledge is that Appleby is slightly different in that there is a community centre and lots of community spaces within the building. So the building is larger, but also the homes are larger. I think it's a big assumption that older people, or they don't want to move into smaller units. You know, they've got lots of belongings. So we have created really spacious homes that entice older people to move with their belongings into Appleby Blue. We're in the process of analysing that. So again, we're trying to kind of tease apart what are the costs for running the community centre and what are the costs of running the almshouse, because we're probably fully operational for about a year now, and we will be going through a process of really analysing our financial model. I think it's important to recognize that Appleby probably is a once in a lifetime opportunity, even for us as United Saint Saviours. And so what we're trying to do now is distill the learnings for our future developments. What is it that we crucially keep for our next development, and what key aspects can we use within the next context and location for the next development? Lizzie, do you want to add anything there?
I think I was just going to add also, we didn't really touch on it in the presentation, but within the report itself, we do talk about the housing chain quite a bit, which we know Lord Best has done a lot of work on, and actually the amount of social housing that the council have been able to offer to, for example, younger families as a result of, as Alison said, the pull factors, and then wanting to move to Appleby, I think, is one of the key data points we've got at the moment. And we're also working our resident support team on the outcome star model, so monitoring how our residents have actually their financial, their emotional well-being, their physical well-being has kind of changed over time. As Alison said, we're 2 years in, but we're starting to be able to see those trends. So it's a long-term investment, and we'll see kind of the long-term implications as time goes on.
So thank you. And it absolutely really so lovely to see twofold things for that. For me, a community centre that really is bringing people from the outside into Appleby Blue and not just provided for residents. It's not the white elephant that community facilities can sometimes be. But also the fact that you have such a fabulous relationship with your local authority, and the success that you can that Appleby Blue has obviously brought. Obviously the investment that Southwark have made in you is great to see there. So a nice segue there into cooperation and joint workings between various local authority and other stakeholders. Jeremy, did you want to ask a couple of questions or put a couple of comments out there about, we're talking about housing needs, support needs, care needs, particularly the duty to cooperate pursuant to the terms of the Care Act?
Yeah, no, I was just struck by when Matt was talking about sort of the importance of relationships, and also the succession of relationships, a successful relationship as well, is that we need to really think much more around that cooperative model. And, you know, the Care Act 2014 sets out a duty to cooperate. Often this is strategically led around service provision, but what I was really struck, notwithstanding the need to think much more about an integrated approach, was what Alison and Lizzie were saying around co-production. And I think that's a natural extension of those relationships and partnerships, but we don't actually often see co-production as a partnership. We actually see co-production on its own. And I think what Alison and Lizzie demonstrate through Appleby Blue and other services that are happening, actually this is not about doing for, it's this about the mutuality. And I'm not sure that either contract law or service level agreements or memorandum of understanding reflect some of that mutuality sometimes. And so it's a real, it just got me thinking about how we sort of perhaps have to think about that sort of co-designing, co-production approach a bit more. And that may be a bit philosophical for a happy hour, but yeah, I thought that was something that we could look at.
That's absolutely what we want, Jeremy. I think, Matt, maybe you can pick up a couple of points there. You talked about the aligning of values, people wanting different things, being honest and open with partners on whatever level.
Yeah, what the point I'd make, and I think it's a really interesting point, Jeff, is you can only regulate so far. You can only, and you're absolutely right, there are various statutory duties to cooperate between entities, there are regulatory duties to cooperate, but actually words on a page and contractual obligations to partner well and cooperate, I think is actually not a great way to get that proper relationship between two entities. The partners shouldn't really have to be driven by a contractual requirement to get the best results. I think actually what's a lot more powerful is doing that due diligence on your partner so that you know that there is that alignment to value, so that whatever there might be in the statutes, the legislation, or paragraph X of the transparency standard by the regulator, none of it matters, because really you've got a partner that is absolutely in tune with what you're trying to achieve, and you know that you've got that shared understanding. That's where I get to on it.
Can I just add to that, Charlotte?
Yes, please do.
And Matt, I agree with so much of what you're saying, but I do also fundamentally believe that it protects the housing provider, the charity, because in Appleby Blue's example, the private developer changed halfway through the project, and if we didn't have the design elements embedded within the contract, we wouldn't. That due diligence was irrelevant because the partner had changed in the process. So I 100% agree with what you're saying, but at the same time, going back to Liz's comments about, a lot of almshouse charities are really small and run by volunteer trustees. It protects the smaller organization too if things change.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's a combination, isn't it? You can't rely exclusively on either. You have to do your due diligence to get the right partner, but then you're right. You need the contractual protection there as a fallback in case you need them.
And that continuing the dialogue, which is where we started this conversation, the communications, making sure that people are talking throughout the process. So when things do change, and things often change, or very much often change during projects, is making sure that that dialogue is there. And I think also making sure that the roles and responsibilities of the various partners within the partnership are looked after. So, Alison, what steps did United St Saviour's take, or does it take, to protect its role, and what does it see as its role in any of these partnerships that you're working on? You're obviously working with people across the board, but what hat are you wearing at which particular time? You're looking at residents, you're talking to the local authority, you're talking to your design professionals. How do you juggle all of those things?
I think fundamentally, and we were talking about kind of teams culture before. I think United St Saviour's, the team across the board, we share the same values and we've got the same sense of purpose. Working for a 500-year-old charity, you definitely realize that you are custodians for future generations. And so our work is definitely grounded not only in addressing the needs of the older people in the communities that we serve now, but also to ensure that future generations will also benefit from the work that we're doing now. No pressure on ourselves, but it does really provide us with the North Star of the work that we want to do and who we want to partner with. So one is seeped in that legacy, but as you mentioned, we have many different hats. We definitely try and make sure that we maintain the integration between our role as a landowner within the borough, with us as a grant maker and a funder within the community, with us as a housing provider, and also delivering direct services. So we try to keep that integrated, and also some partners will cross those different activities of the charity. So I think communication within the organization is also essential, so that we know that different teams are being made aware of the conversations that different teams might be having with the same partner.
Thank you. Elizabeth, any comments on that sort of the legacy points that Alison made there, the responsibility that you have as a trustee of the Almshouse Association to continue what has been offered by almshouses for centuries now?
Yes, and it's inbuilt actually in each of the governing documents. So one of the standard things you'll find in any, because all of the almshouse charities have their own governing document, and within that, within what the charity law, there is a duty of care to the charity, which is all about succession, perpetuity, keeping it going, and there is that very definitely that feeling of holding in trust, hence the trustee element of it. Yeah, it's definitely a holding in trust.
I liked the mention that you made in your presentation about the new age of philanthropy, which we're seeing a lot of noise about at the moment. Do you think that's what's happening? Is lots of the strategic partnerships that we've been looking at are a bit more formalized, I suppose, or much more driven by businesses looking possibly to make more business for themselves? How do you see that balancing with a philanthropic partnership working.
Yeah, that's interesting, and we could have a long debate on that actually, because from an ESG point of view, for those investors who are looking to get sort of social returns as well, then there is definitely movement and traction to be gained from investing in almshouses and development and social housing. I think there's possibly, this is just my personal thought, that there's a bit of a lull in this at the moment, and that's because investors always want a return, and no matter how much they say they'll have the social return, they always do need a financial return as well. And there are a lot of loosening of ESG criteria at the moment in order to allow for diversification of investment and total return and increased return. So I think there's a bit of a lull at the moment, but certainly when times are a bit better, I think we might see that might come back a little bit stronger.
Thank you. We've got a couple of moments left. So if we just go around the table, Matt, any summing up comments that you'd like to push across?
I actually just bring together 2 points very, very quickly. One thing is what Elizabeth said earlier. I just really want to reiterate it, because you spoke, Elizabeth, really well about the language and about the kind of understanding what different entities are doing. And for some outside of the social housing world, the language that we all use in the affordable housing sector can be really difficult to understand. You just spoke about the investors, and there are concepts that we're really familiar with: trustees, almshouses, shared ownership, or whatever it might be, that actually is sometimes really difficult to access. So I think just bring that back into a wider point. A good partnership is one where both sides are educated and understand not only what they can bring to the table, but what their counterparty can bring to the table. I think that's you made that point really well earlier.
Communication again. United St Saviour's, Alison, Lizzie, any summing up comments from you?
Thank you, Charlotte. I think just off what Matt was saying earlier is that a lot of these strategic partnerships have been opportunistic, and that it does take a mind shift to make it more strategic in the partnerships that you get involved in. And just to reiterate that with Appleby, it is an absolute amazing project. But even for us as an organization, there is learning to be made, and that learning can be implemented in different contexts. So I just encourage different organizations to take elements of our learning, but also to share their learning with us. And that's how we can move forward. Lizzie?
Yeah, I was just going to echo what Alison said there, just that we are always giving tours and doing knowledge exchange days with other organisations, and we are just keen to kind of share and also learn from others what they're doing and how they might also be able to give us information that might improve how we're doing things at Appleby as well. So please do get in touch if you want to do one of those knowledge exchange days.
Thank you. Elizabeth, last word for you?
I think I just was thinking then, if I did have a last word, it would be to remind everybody about your custodian issue again, or your mention again, which is that there is no right to buy with almshouses. And I think that is also why it feels like a very solid foundation for older people's housing.
Thank you. Well, here's to almshouses for another few more centuries. Jeremy, shall I let you sum up and then we'll say goodbye?
Well, what a fantastic session, and you're already getting a number of people commenting as such in the chat box. I wanted to thank all the speakers for the really excellent presentations, really capturing sort of a range of things. But I think that point about sort of stewardship and the role almshouses have played both in their local communities, both with the populations that they serve, but also they are constantly listening to those communities to make sure that the appropriate support, care, housing and beyond is available. And it's about living a better life in older age and not as a last resort. So thanks very much for your presentations. The session's been about strategic partnerships, and next week the HousingLIN's Happy Hour is about a particular strategic partnership the HousingLIN has entered into with Vivenza. You've heard about Vivenza through the Lemonade Project, the Serious Game, and a number of other projects that HousingLIN has covered, such as the TAPPI programme. But we've got a 5-year project with the Vivenza Foundation, which we're going to sort of draw attention to and give you a taster next week. So if this is your first Happy Hour, do join us again next Tuesday. And Lizzie, I think your Happy Hour or your session on the 28th of October is a Tuesday as well, but you end about half an hour before our next one starts. So you've got a day of action learning, I think, on the 28th as well. But I do encourage people who have joined us today to do sign up to United St Saviour's series as well. Can I also thank the team behind the scenes, Sally, for putting on such a great Happy Hour, and the rest of the team back in the HousingLIN for making these so successful. You may not know, but we had nearly 200 people registered to attend, and as Sally posted in the chat box earlier, slides, recording, and the presentations will be made available later this week. But on behalf of the HousingLIN, can I thank all of you, and Charlotte, can I hand back to you and thank you for your continued support, and look forward to planning the next one with you.
So always a pleasure. Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday evening. Thank you.